Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast, the show where you hear from amazing and inspiring wives sharing their struggles, triumphs, and advice for this journey called marriage. Here's your host, Belah Rose.
Hello there, and welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast. Thank you so much for joining me in the new year, 2016. Awesome to have you back. We had a couple of weeks break, and I hope that you had a wonderful Christmas and New Year. And I'm just excited to have you back. If you did get a chance to spend time with your husband or wife and dream a little bit about the new year, I hope you got a chance to, just because God is the God of hope, and He wants us to have hope. And today we have a really moving story from a man named Larry Hagner. We're going to get into that in a minute, but it's powerful. And even in the midst of really, really challenging things, we can still have hope. That is part of this amazing journey with Christ, is that we get to have hope in the midst of really challenging situations. So I am going to share with you an email that I received. I usually share iTunes reviews, which I so appreciate. So if you haven't gotten a chance to send us an iTunes review, please do that. But let me go ahead and read this. I just got it, I think, yesterday. So it says, "The podcast is fantastic. I've been a pastor for 25 years, and we've needed you many, many years ago. It's going to help millions of people. My wife and I listen while we work out, and we're loving your sincerity, which is superseded by your passion for God, which gives the whole podcast great validity. So keep up the great work." So thank you so much for the email. Thank you for those of you that listen and reach out to me or do the iTunes review. That just matters so much. And I so appreciate it, because it actually helps people find the podcast, and it might be something that's going to change their life. So I'd encourage you to do that if you haven't gotten a chance. Thank you. All right. Well, today again is Larry Hagner's story, and I'd say probably get the tissues ready for this one. It's a powerful story, and I think he's got some wonderful lessons that he shares with us. It matters a lot to your marriage, what you go through together, and I think Larry's got some wonderful principles that he pulls out of his experience as well. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome back to Delight Your Marriage, listeners. I'm really thrilled that you're joining me today. Thank you. And I've got a really special guest, Mr. Larry Hagner from GoodDadProject.com. Welcome, Larry.
Hey, how you doing, Belah?
I'm doing great. I'm really great. I'm really excited to have you. And I'm really excited to jump into your story. And you've got an awesome heart for dads and for kids. And I want you to talk about that. But would you be willing to introduce yourself, your family, and a little bit about your day-to-day life?
Sure. So I started the Good Dad Project about 4 years ago. And really what it's developed into now is it's really just a mission. We have a podcast called the Good Dad Project Podcast. I also have a book out called The Dad's Edge that's available on Amazon. But really, I mean, the majority of my time is spent, writing. I'm an author, speaker, also a husband, been married for the past 13 years to a wonderful woman by the name of Jessica. I've actually known her for 20 years, but we've been married 13 years, and it's just been a phenomenal journey. And
Wow.
I am the father of 3 boys. My oldest son, Ethan, 9. I have a 7-year-old Mason. I have a 2-year-old Lawson, and I have another boy on the way. And he's doing,
Wow.
yeah, wow. Everybody says wow. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny once you go from 3 kids to 4.
Yeah.
There's no more congratulations. Like it's everyone says wow, or what's wrong with you, or seriously. So but he's going to be born here in 7 weeks. So in February. I'm not sure
Wow.
when this show is going to launch, but I know we're recording here in December. But he's going to be here in February. The cool thing is that we have 2 boys that are 20 months apart. So Ethan and Mason are 20 months apart, and then Lawson and this one will be like 24 months apart, just about. So it's perfect. 2 and 2.
Yeah. No, that's great. I've got a 2-year-old also, and he's a boy, and I've got a 1-year-old, and so there's a lot of emotions going on with those 2-year-olds.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's funny. We're going through the terrible twos right now a little bit, and
Right.
he's a bit of a challenge, but you just roll with it. I mean, being that we've had two already, we kind of
Yeah.
sort of know what to expect at this point. So we're just like,
Yeah.
we'll get through it, and we'll get through it too. So you always do.
As my oldest is going through it, I'm like, and now I have a second child that's going to go through it soon. And it's just kind of wild that happens. But it's all part of the whole parenting process. So it's good.
I have to ask real
Yeah.
quick. So how far apart are yours in age? I mean, they sound like a year apart.
Yeah, a year and a half. Yeah, they're close.
That is really
So
close. Yeah.
yeah, actually my 1-year-old today is his birthday. So a year ago today. Now here's something I haven't shared on the podcast. I'll share this with you, Larry. We actually accidentally had the baby at home. So
Accidentally had the baby at home.
accidentally.
How,
We
how
live
does
a
that happen?
we live a couple blocks away from the hospital, so we were like, last time it was 14 hours. We'll have plenty of time to walk over there once it's ready. And no, we were 5 hours into labor, and I was like, baby, it's got to happen. It's got to happen now. And my husband drew the bath, and my husband delivered the baby.
Oh my gosh. I mean, when you first said the hospital's a few blocks away, my first thought was like, it's far. We're not gonna make it. Let's just stay home. Fill up the
That's
tub.
right.
We're good.
That's right. Yeah, it was a wild experience, but it was wonderful. It was like an amazing, amazing experience. And if I do have another baby, I think I'll try to actually plan it so it happens at home, not the accident. But it was pretty crazy. It was really an amazing experience.
You are brave. Brave. Did I say brave? I'm gonna say it again. Brave. Brave woman. My gosh.
Well,
Wow.
thank you.
I mean, I listen to your podcast. I'm a fan of your content, but I mean,
Oh,
it's
thank
taken to a whole new level. You're like a ninja now. Man.
I'm taking that.
Yeah, you should. You should. Hats off to you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was yeah, thank God it was a great experience. It was really wild. So yeah, it's one of those things. Birth is such an interesting bonding experience, I think, for a husband and wife. I think it's just unparalleled. You're in an absolute crisis and you need each other to be there and hold each other strong. I think it's pretty incredible.
That's an understatement, I think, in that situation. So, my gosh, I mean, give your husband a hug for me, will you? Because I mean, I've been in medical device sales also for the past
Oh,
16 years. So I've seen surgery after
wow.
surgery after surgery, and I've seen some pretty
Wow.
wild stuff. And I got to be honest with you, I don't know if it was. Yeah, I've never passed out, and I've seen some pretty gory things in the OR.
Wow.
But when my
Yeah.
first son was born, I'll never forget this. I mean, that's why I say hats off to your husband and you in particular. But the birth of my first son, so I was in there, and when they went to do an episiotomy, I almost completely
Mm.
passed out. I was there with my wife,
Mm.
and my believe it or not, my father-in-law was in the room.
Oh gosh.
As well. And what happened is like, I guess he saw my face, and I usually always kind of keep like a 5 o'clock shadow on my face. And he's like, I suddenly saw like, because I have a dark beard, and he's like, I suddenly saw like this contrast of complete pale up against the hair on your face, and then I saw these beads of sweat start to form in your 5 o'clock shadow, and I started to see you sway. So what he did is he actually got behind me,
Wow.
it just in case, like, because I was about ready to fall over, but I just kind of caught
Oh.
control of my breath and got through it.
Yeah.
So man, the fact that you guys did that, wow.
Yeah. Well, it's unreal. It's just so anyone that's pregnant out there, I mean, it is okay. Birth is good. It's going to be okay. Don't be scared. But it's definitely it's an experience. Every single birth is an experience of epic proportions.
Yes, it is. That's an understatement.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so tell us a little bit about you and your wife's personalities, if you would.
Oh boy. So, I'm kind of, my personality is I am like a doer. I mean, and
Mm.
I've spent the majority of my career in sales, so I know like the different personality styles. And I am what you call an extroverted doer. So I love people. I get my energy from people. I love to speak. I'm outgoing. I
Mm.
kind of feed off that. And as far as being a doer, um, yeah, I write my list of what I'm going to do and the critical things that I need to do to get done, and I just do them because nothing drives me more crazy than to have something on my list that I know I need to get done that is not crossed off. I mean, it just wears on me. So I'm
Mm,
like a
yeah.
doer. My wife, on the other hand, she's more of an introvert, and but she's such a compassionate, wonderful wife and mother, and I mean,
Mm,
and our personalities are quite a bit different. But what we've noticed over the past 20 years from knowing each other is they couldn't complement each other better, because
mm,
for instance, like when I start to get stressed out, because I'm a very type A person. When I start to get stressed and I'm like, I kind of get that defeated mindset every now and again. She's one of those people
mm,
that she's kind of like a rock. She kind of reels me back in, and she's good about grounding me. And on the flip
mm.
side, when she gets stressed out, her energy gets really, really low. So one of the things that I can do for her is bring her energy back up. So it's a awesome. I mean, that's just one aspect. I mean, I can go into several,
Yeah.
but that's really some of the dynamics of our relationship. I mean, our relationship is built so much on communication, and we do
Mm.
several things even a day to make sure that that is rock solid, because as you know, when you have more than one kid, and we're about ready to step into the land of four kids here, that is so important. I mean, it's so important
Mm.
because you can lose each other, and sometimes once you're lost, it is so hard to get that back. So that's one of the things that we are very conscious of, and we do things on a daily basis, we do things on a monthly basis, and we even do things when we're in the moment with each other. And I know through the interview that maybe we can go through some of those things.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. But before we dive into that more, this is really about empowering and inspiring wives. And we do have husband listeners, but it's mostly focused for wives. And so I'd love for you to share a scripture or a quote that's meant a lot to you.
Yeah, so one of the scriptures that have really meant a lot to me for a long time, actually, and I heard it quite a few years ago, because I think it speaks to maybe some of the ebb and flow of the intimacy of marriage, of
Mm-hmm.
times where you feel very, very close, and then times you feel a little bit distant. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think both parties, whether you're a husband or a wife, you're very well aware and you're very attuned to which one of those situations you're in. So one of the scriptures that definitely speak volumes to me is, this is 1 Corinthians 7:5, which is, "Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come back together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." And I think
Mm.
one of the reasons I love that quote is because I think it speaks volumes to maybe those peaks and valleys of your marriage. And when you feel
Mm-hmm.
that maybe, I mean, you should always pray, but when you're in maybe a bit of a valley, that you come together, you pray together, and that foundation is there through prayer and God. And to
Mm.
bring each other back to that same place where intimacy can then be reestablished and reborn a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
work your way back up that peak and not stay in that valley.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's true. I mean, marriage is alive and active. It's not something that's just static. You really have to be intentional about making sure that communication is there, and that your intimacy is able to be in a environment that is encouraging that. So, I want to talk about that more. And I want to hear about a story of a struggle that you and your wife have had, and what you learned through that, if you'd be willing to share.
Telling this story, okay, and I'm just going to preface this. It's going
Yeah.
to be a bit controversial for your listeners, but
Okay.
the end result isn't controversial. So, but there are going to be some
Mm.
things that I say in this story that probably going to make some of your listeners' eyebrows go up a little bit. But I want to let you know that this story does have it has an interesting, um, sort of a sad ending, but also there was a lot of good that came out of it and a lot of strength. So
Mm.
I would say, this is hard for me to talk about, but I've done it
Yeah.
only on a couple of other shows. But I think for your listeners, especially for the women listeners, and even for your men listeners, this is important. So
Yeah.
It was actually a year ago, 1 year ago, pretty much, um, to this moment in time that you and I are speaking. My wife and I found out just after Halloween in 2014 that we were pregnant with our fourth.
Mm. Yeah.
And we were a bit surprised about that because I wouldn't say we were being careful, but we weren't really trying. And in the past, believe it or not, even though we're about ready to have our fourth again here, we've always had challenges
Yeah.
getting pregnant. But
Mm.
so we found out we were pregnant, and we were like, wow, gosh, four, whew, okay, but here we go, we're ready for it. So my wife
Yeah.
is over 35. So when you're over 35, her OB is pretty aggressive. So she wanted her to get, this 10-week blood work drawn up of the health of the baby and my wife's panels and all this stuff that basically tells you, you know, is everything okay? And what we found out at that 10-week mark, and we found out right before Thanksgiving of last year. So we found out,
Mm.
number one, we got a phone call from, and this is the day before Thanksgiving of last year, so it made Thanksgiving pretty
Mm.
interesting. We got a
Mm.
call from our OB personally. She called us, not her nurse, but our OB, and she's like, "Look, I have some news for you. Number one, you're having a boy, so another boy for you. But I also have some challenging news, and that challenging news is your baby came back with trisomy 13." And I
Mm.
had no clue, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have no idea what trisomy 13 is. And I didn't either. I had
Right.
no clue what it was. Basically, what trisomy 13 is it's an extra chromosome of the 13th chromosome. And what that basically means in a nutshell, without getting into the science behind it, is the 13th chromosome is responsible for pretty much all major organs in the body: the liver, the kidney, the lungs, the heart, everything. And what they know about trisomy 13 is that babies who are born with it don't usually live past 7 days. I think literally, so like the mortality rate is like 98%. The
Oh
miscarriage rate,
man.
yeah, the miscarriage rate is 40%. Um,
Wow.
so we didn't know how to digest that information whatsoever. And
Mm.
when you go on, Dr. Google and all that, and you start doing your own research, it tends to really scare the bejesus out of you. It just scares you to death. And
Mm.
what we found out is like, wow, we are faced with something huge here. So we went back to our
Mm.
OBGYN the very next week. She sat us down. She's like, look, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've only seen two trisomy 13 babies in my entire practice. And of course, like, I know all about this. She's like, I don't know of one documented case of a child living past a week. She said,
Oh.
so here are your three options. She's like, and I am not coaching you to do one thing either way, but here are your options. Okay. Number one,
Yeah.
the majority of women and couples who are faced with this, they usually terminate the pregnancy because they know
Mm.
that this child will pass away anyway. Your
Mm.
second option, is basically miscarriage. 40% of all cases will miscarry, but
Mm.
still, that's 60% that will go all the way, which is a pretty high number. And the third option is going full term, having the baby and knowing the baby will pass away. She's like, sometimes the babies don't even make it through birth. She's like, and if you want to do that, I'm not the one to deliver this child. You need to go see a specialist. So
Mm.
those are three very grim situations. I mean, it's like, what is the best of this? So
Yeah.
so I'll be honest with you. I have three kids. My two
Yeah.
are old enough to really understand. They knew we were pregnant. They knew it was a boy. Um, so I have never been pro-abortion ever. I
Yeah.
believe that it's
Yeah.
not our right to kill any human being, whether that human being is 80 or whether it's not even outside the womb. It's just not something I believe in. This is where
Yeah.
I get kind of to the controversial part. So
Yeah.
my automatic response to this was, we should terminate this pregnancy. And I didn't do it
Mm.
because I did. It went against everything I believed in, and my wife too. She doesn't believe in that either. But we really sat down and we thought about, like, okay, what's going to happen if we go full term? My boys, my 9-year-old, my 7-year-old, are going to watch this baby die. And this baby is
Mm.
going to die in the NICU, hooked up to tubes, and there might be pain involved. And then with our relationship, our marriage, like, how in the world are we even going to get through this? How?
Yeah.
So it really became like, what's the more humane thing to do in this situation? And what we thought at the time was terminating the pregnancy. So,
Yeah.
believe it or not, December 12th of last year, we had a date to go do this termination, because if we went past December 20th, it then falls into I guess my wife would be too far along for a regular
Mm.
termination, and it'd be more of a surgical procedure, and it would be a little bit more dangerous and all that. So
Mm.
what we did is, you know, we decided that like 2 weeks before December 12th. And this decision, it's the first thing that you wake up with in the morning and the last thing you think about at night. And every time my wife and I saw each other's face, it was a strong reminder of what we were up against. And we almost didn't know how to relate to each other, how to handle it. And there was a lot of stress. And plus trying
Mm.
to raise three other boys at the same time that we weren't sharing this information with them.
Mm.
So December 11th came, the night before we were supposed to, and I don't know what it was. I was praying a lot about it, and sorry, I don't know why. I It just sort of suddenly came to me that this is not right, and so I went to
Mm.
my wife and I just said, you know, I don't know about you, but I don't think we should do this. And my wife kind of broke down and she said, I'm so glad you said that, because, you know, I don't want to do it either. She's like, so
Mm.
I just told her, I was like, look, let's just cancel the appointment. I don't want to do this. Let's go see a counselor, and maybe we should just get some coaching around this to see what we should do. So we got our pastor involved, and we also got a
Mm.
counselor that is involved with our church. We sat
Mhm.
down with both of them and we explained the situation to him. And I got to be honest, Bella, I mean, like, sometimes you don't realize what you're up against until you explain it to somebody else. And when we
Yeah.
were telling these two what we're up against, both of these grown men were just completely choked up, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, okay, this is a lot. And this is a different situation. This isn't like you're aborting this child because you don't want it. This baby was conceived out
Yeah.
of love. Therefore,
Yeah.
so anyway, I'll never forget what they told us. And they told us this. And I even wrote about this in my book. It's in my last chapter. But the
Mm.
counselor looked at us and he said, look, here's what I do know about you both. If you decide to terminate this pregnancy, it goes against everything that you believe in, and it goes against how you were both wired. And it's going to be a very dark thing for you. And what's going to happen is when people ask you about what happened with that pregnancy, you're going to say, oh, we lost it, we miscarried, and it's going to become this very dark secret that's going to eat away at you. And the very fear of losing your marriage because you go through this full term, he goes, I would bet that is what's going to destroy your marriage, is the fact that you guys decided to do this. And
Mm.
he's like, however, if you decide to put this boy, in God's hands and
Yeah.
take him when he's
Yeah.
ready, you are going to be overwhelmed by the support, the love. All these people are going to come out of the woodwork, and they're going to lock arms with you. They're going to pray for you. They're going to be with you. And it's going to be completely overwhelming. And what you are going to do, sorry,
Yeah. Yeah.
is you will send a very clear message to your other boys that you don't give up on anyone. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
it became very clear what our decision was, and we decided to go full term. And
Yeah.
we were terrified, but we felt very good about that decision. So I'll
Yeah.
end the story with this, um, and then what we got out of it. So December 28th of last year, this whole thing came to a very surprising end. We decided, at this point, we knew we were going full term. We knew we were doing it, for at least a couple weeks. We were getting ready to leave for, I think, a holiday party with my wife's family, and my wife ran into the bathroom frantically, and I didn't know what was going on. I opened up the bathroom door, see if she was okay, and there was just blood everywhere. And
Mm.
she had a look of absolute panic on her face, and she's like, I think I'm in labor. And oh my gosh. So I immediately called 911. I was like, I think my wife is in labor. She's only 20 weeks along. I don't think we're going to make it to the hospital. There's blood everywhere. So next phone call I did, I called my neighbors. I got my two older boys out of the house because I didn't want them to see anything. They came over, they got them. And then what happened is the paramedics came in. We ended up having our baby boy on the floor of our bathroom, and he had passed away. And I know that sounds graphic, but I got to see him. He was no bigger than my hand. My wife held him. I held my wife upright while she held him. I can't sit here and tell you that it was peaceful, and I can't sit here and tell you that it was horrible. To be honest with you, here we are a year later, and I can't still put words around it. But what I can tell you is it was a lot more humane, and I felt like in a way it was God's way, even though it sounded overwhelming. Maybe it was God's way of allowing us to say goodbye in a more humane way than what we were going to originally decide. And so here's what we learned out of that. And my entire last chapter of my book is dedicated to what we learned out of that situation. So we learned perspective. We learned, okay, there are things in a marriage, right, that are going to ebb and flow. There's going to be peaks and valleys. There's going to be times where you're close and when you're not. The biggest lesson we learned was the story that we tell ourselves in crisis. And what I mean by that is my mind and my heart wanted to default to the attitude of, I don't know how we're going to get through this. This is horrible. I'm angry at the situation. Jessica and I aren't getting along. Our marriage is probably going to fall apart. And here's the thing. If you tell yourself that and you focus on that, that's exactly what's going to happen. However, every time I felt that voice that I wanted to default to that crept in, I immediately interdicted that and was like, and just said, no, I'm not going to feel that way. In fact, I don't know the reasons why this is happening, and I don't know what the end result's going to be. All I know is that I have faith that it's going to somehow, some way make us stronger. And I kept saying that to myself over and over and over again. And it became, believe it or not, a very tough, strengthening lesson of how we can do that in every aspect of our life. When you feel that voice start to creep in of, a diminished view of perspective, you can immediately stop that, whether that's say a prayer, reverse those words somehow, some way, and train your mind to think a different way. And I swear that's one of the things that got us through that. And I'm sorry, I know that was a long story, but I would say that was one of the toughest things we went through. And it was one of the best lessons we learned from that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think all of us are touched by your story. That's incredible. And I want to point out what you said. I don't know why this is happening, and I don't know what the results are going to be, but it's going to make us stronger through it. That's powerful. It's powerful. And I know that listeners are out there, tearing up and recognizing their own story in yours of hearing, what's happened. It's amazing that we started this conversation talking about births and pregnancy and all this, and just there's so much pain associated with what's happened in lives around birth, around abortion, around all of this, and to recognize that we don't have to know why, we don't have to know what's going to happen, but that God's going to use this for the good of your life and what's going to happen. That's what he says in Romans. He says, all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purposes. So you can hang on to that. You can hold on to that.
I couldn't agree more. To be honest with you, I mean, I just think everything you just wrapped that up with, I couldn't. You couldn't have wrapped it up any better than that. I mean, and it's absolutely true. One of the other things I'll say too is, so in my book, it's called The Dad's Edge, and it's 9 simple ways to have unlimited patience, improve relationships, and positive lasting memories. And when I was writing the book, I was done with the book right around when this whole thing unfolded. And at the time, it was 8 simple ways to all those things. And my editor, he knew what was going on, And my editor said, the book is great, and you give 8 really good chapters on several facets of a man's life and how to get through things. But what the book doesn't have is how to get through the big stuff. And what I think you need to do is write a 9th chapter on what you just went through. And I told him, I was like, you are insane. I was like, I can barely talk about it. I can't write about it. And he's like, you should. You should. I feel like, if you felt that this all happened for a reason, then why not empower others with it? So that the last 20 pages of my book is only 100 pages, but the last 20 pages of my book took me almost 3 months because it was just taxing to write. But I put it in there. And what I have found is that chapter hits home to almost I get more emails, more reviews, more texts, more feedback on that last chapter than anything else. So I know that it had to have happened for a reason.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem. Sorry I kind of cracked a little bit there, but it is a tough story to kind of talk through.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Thank you so much, Larry, for sharing so openly with us. And I think all of us are moved by it. And I think as something we can take away from it is really how Larry approached the situation, that when it was the last thing he thought about when he went to sleep and the first thing he thought about when he woke up, he had kind of a mantra in his head of like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's on the other side, but I know that it's going to make us stronger. I know that there's a reason for this. And I think all of us can hold on to that ultimately there is a reason. Ultimately, God is working something for good out of our situations. And so I just want to leave you with that and encourage you to keep that as your mindset as you go through the challenging times, maybe just this week, or maybe it's been for a while that you've been going through something really challenging. But remember that God has a reason for this. We don't see it right now on this side of eternity, but somehow God's doing something that matters. All right. God bless you. I love you. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you next Tuesday.
Thanks for joining. If you've been inspired by this show, would you help spread the word? If you take a moment to review and subscribe, others can find us more easily. Find out how at delightyourmarriage.com/iTunes. Until next time, live with love, wisdom, and passion.